Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's author interview for the Co-Ape Journal. I'm Duffin, and I am the past president of Co-Ape, and I serve as the chair of publications, and particularly of the Co-Ape Journal. And today, it's my pleasure to highlight an article that we are featuring in our technology and digital literacy edition. The name of, or the title of the article is Research-Informed Recommended Online Instruction Practices for Adult Education. That's a mouthful. A very interesting article, though, that is co-authored by three individuals, two of whom are joining us today for this interview. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and ask Nicole and Tawny to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves. So let me start with you, Nicole, if you'd introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Finn. My name is Nicole Pyle. I'm an associate professor at Utah State University in the School of Teacher Education and Leadership. My research is in the area of dropout prevention, adolescent literacy, and college and career readiness. And Tawny and I have worked together for 9 years on every single research project that I've run. And she has co-authored this with me, and I'll turn it over to Tawny.
Thank you, Nicole. I am Tawny Hoskin, and as Nicole mentioned, I worked with her at Utah State University, and I'm currently an instructional designer here at Atomic Jolt. And Joel Duffin is also a co-author on the paper, and he is actually the co-founder and CEO of Atomic Jolt.
Well, thank you so much for those introductions. It's great to meet both of you and just to learn a little bit about you, even your author bios and your background and your interest in technology, and particular for this, online instructional practices. So I'm going to go ahead and just start off, and I'll just throw the question out there, and either one of you can respond. As I've read this article, I just found it to be extremely interesting and very pertinent to where we are today in education, and particularly in adult education. So let me ask just the general question: why did you write this article for the Co-Ape Journal?
That is a great question. It's actually a catalyst. The catalyst for this article was the work we're currently doing with the Iowa Department of Education. We partnered with them to create a full 100% online curriculum that is offered to all levels of adult learners. And this is known as IDEAL, Iowa Distance Education Adult Literacy, another little mouthful as well. The design was a little bit interesting because we wanted to utilize open educational resources, but we wanted to do so in an effective manner and using effective instructional practices for adult learners. And that proved to be quite a roadblock in finding what those actual practices were. And that's where Dr. Pyle was a great resource for us in helping to figure out what that was for Atomic Jolt. Nicole?
And so one of the reasons I mentioned why the history of Tawny and I working together is because, as she mentioned, her and Joel are working with Atomic Jolt and this project with Iowa and for online, distance education, adult literacy in an online format. And while that wasn't necessarily my expertise, it has since become an area that I've really dived into, adult education, online practices, because of the project, but also the context of the world we're in, which is very, very much an online world at this moment. And likely in the future. And so the purpose of the article is, Tawny said, with the catalyst of the project, but really with the context of COVID and where the direction of many of our adult education programs are across multiple states, but where many of our states are actually looking into going if they're not already there. So I can say with certainty that there's certain states that I'm talking with right now that are intending to go towards a model like Iowa has. And the purpose of the article was to look at what the research says on online instruction in adult education and really merging those two topics to find out what are those practices and to prepare a manuscript that hopefully can inform the field what those practices might be, so that adult educators know what are some of those design practices, what are some of those delivery practices that they can embed in their own online instruction in the future.
Great. Yes, thank you for that. And I will say that what I found with this particular piece is the value that it brings to looking at instructional practices, particularly in digital instructional practices and adult education. I really believe that there's quite a bit that can be gained from that. And so a natural lead in to the next question, and you've already alluded to it, but I'm definitely looking forward to even more information on, how will adult education practitioners benefit from reading this article? And in turn, how will that benefit the learners with whom they work?
I'm going to start by answering it slightly different, as in how we benefited from this, because I feel like a lot of others can do the same thing. When we were going into this design, we found a lot of good, high quality resources to pull, some of which were self-paced. And that's where a lot of information online, a lot of courses are geared towards right now. And we found that that's really not the most effective best practices, but we can now utilize this and leverage this content and pull it in and enhance it by creating these student-teacher interactions, these student-student interactions, facilitated discussions, real-world collaborative projects. We specifically utilized Canvas, and through that platform and also through atomic assessments, we were able to utilize a lot of these effective research practices and integrate them into the design. And it really it will benefit the learners and also those reading the articles as they design and also enhance their current curriculum that they've brought online.
I think, Tawny, that's an excellent response, because it's from your perspective and from how we partnered with Ideal, but it's also from the working with the adult educators across the state of Iowa. We presented at a conference recently over the summer to train the teachers on what those online practices are. So exactly what we're talking about. And we used the research that we gathered and that was highlighted in the manuscript to prepare the teachers for how we design the courses, but then more importantly, how they will deliver those instructional practices and the curriculum that the courses are designed with. And all of that's research informed. It's research based that we prepared in the manuscript and we used to design those online courses and prepare the teachers in a professional development during that conference to deliver those instructional practices.
I think it's great too. As I read through this article, I've been teaching online actually since 2003, so I've been in the game for a long time. And yet, with my specialization being in adult education and so on, I really appreciate the fact that you investigated, you really looked at the literature, and you integrated things like not only the technology, but looking at adult learners, particularly in adult basic education, the integration of concepts such as universal design, et cetera. I thought that was very, very interesting, the way that you brought all of that together. And so I say all that to say, those are my takeaways from the article, but what do you hope that your readers will actually take away from reading your article?
I think one of the most important takeaways that we hope our readers will learn from the manuscript is that the organization of the manuscript is intended to provide readers with design and delivery. So how might we use the research to prepare courses, online courses in the design of them, and then how it is, and I'm sorry, then how adult educators might then use the design and use the research informed practices in the manuscript to then deliver that instruction. And that was ultimately the two main, I mean, not just the content of the manuscript, but the way that we set it up was to hope that our readers would walk away with design practices and delivery practices in an online world for our adult learners. And that was like two main goals for our hope.
And along with that, I personally really hope to empower not only those that are creating the curriculum, but also teachers that are delivering it. As Nicole was talking about, you have the power to adapt and modify your current curriculum to have effective instruction. You don't need to, throw it away. You don't need to completely recreate everything. There are little nuggets in this article for everybody to take away and to have more effective teaching practices.
Absolutely, and I think that there are so many folks now who are reading, who have read or will read this article that'll take a great interest in, particularly in looking at the modifications and taking a look at how do I take that existing curriculum and make it effective in a digital setting, whether it's wholly digital or whether it's supplemental digital and so on. So very, very interesting. So with that, let me ask you: do you have any additional ideas or additional comments that you'd like to share with our readers?
I do. I think about being a former high school teacher and kind of this young adult participant group that I've been working with as a teacher and now as a researcher, and then moving into this adult education world. And I think about how the context of COVID and the kind of the world for which we're in today, and we are moving to, and we will continue to need research to inform practices in online world for adult education is so it's so critical that our researchers, our policymakers, our practitioners focus on these topics, online education and adult education, because we have lost so many of our learners who have not returned to the educational system. And the hope is that our adult education system we can find those students, and we can create more access for the students who are young adults and who move into kind of the adult education domain. And that may present, and I hope that it presents, an opportunity for our youth who in a few years from now are adults, or who have become adults during this time of COVID, that they can find themselves completing high school and completing some form or some amount of post-secondary education. And so I look at adult education as a real opportunity to capitalize on for the youth that we have really lost during the time of COVID. And I hope that our federal government and our researchers and policymakers, practitioners will continue to prioritize adult education.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Really a very interesting read, a lot of great information, great application principles, and so on. So again, the article is Research-Informed Recommended Online Instruction Practices for Adult Education. So again, I want to thank you, Nicole Pyle and Tawny Hoskin, for not only contributing this article, but also for taking the time to speak to our readers. Thanks for joining us.